You're listening to episode 145, Ashley and Martha's stories from Dear NICU Mama. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and/or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I am so happy that you're here today. I am Katie Taylor, a certified child life specialist and host of the Child Life on Call podcast. Today is a really special episode. I have been on their podcast before, Dear NICU Mama, but today I get to interview Ashley and Martha, and they are just absolutely wonderful. I do want to give a warning that if we do talk about infant loss at the beginning of this podcast episode, so if you want, I would fast forward just a little bit through Martha's part of the story, and then we can move on to another part. But I did just want to give that warning in case your heart's not in the place to hear it today. Their relationship began from a DM on Instagram, which I love because there are so many of you that I feel like I know really well, but of course have never met before. And I just love what comes, the good stuff from social media. We'll talk a bit about that too. So I'm so glad you're here today, and we will get started talking to Ashley and Martha. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners. I've got two special women here today, and I think the best way to introduce them is to have them introduce themselves. And you probably heard of them before, especially if you have had a baby in the NICU. I hope that you have heard of them and other medical professionals that work with parents and whoever it may be that have gone through any kind of a NICU stay. These are just some amazing ladies. And the other part I really want to bring up is that as we chat today, it's going to be a little bit of a different episode because we're going to have each of these wonderful women share their stories. And then we're also going to talk about what we're really here, and that's about community. And that's exactly their entire mission and just why we're so honored to share it. So whether you're a parent listening, a child life specialist, a student, you're not going to get anywhere with your patients if they don't have a support system. And parents, you're not going to be able to get through this if you don't have somebody walking alongside you or before you or in front of you. So use your resources. And that's why Dear NICU Mama is here today. So Martha, you want to go ahead and get started? And really, we just want to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about your story, if however long or short you want to make it. This is about you, and we're just kind of the vessel to listen and have other parents hear what you're going through.
Of course. Thank you so much, Katie, for having us. This is a blast and also hilarious. It's just super fun. And also what a gift that you give people to be able to share their stories. It's like the greatest pleasure we experience too with the Dear NICU Mama podcast. And so It is, like I was saying before we started, we love you. We love your work so much. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So my name is Martha. I am from the Midwest. I have had 2 kids in the NICU. I had my son, JP, in 2018. Nope, 2015. That's right. To what is time? In 2015. And he was born prematurely at 25 weeks. I went into the hospital about 23 weeks because I was having bleeding, and they told me that I had what they call bulging membranes. It's really cute. It basically meant that the amniotic sac was coming out of my body. I was dilated and it was coming out, which was also really cute. They put me in something called Trendelenburg, which is basically they invert you and try to get the membranes to go back in. It did not work. I did not sit up for 2 weeks, and I know that's nothing compared to what other people go through, but I did not move or sit up for 2 weeks.
What was that? We don't do that.
I was gaslighting myself, and I thought no one would
Ashley,
notice.
I'm not going to let her do that. Re-say that sentence, please.
I stayed horizontal for 2 weeks, which was really hard because I had to use a bedpan, and my husband helped me with that. We got very close. It was very fun and cute. And we had our son. At 25 weeks, they tried to stop contractions. It just couldn't happen. I ended up getting a very nasty E. coli infection and became septic. We had an emergency C-section. I don't remember a lot of it because I was kind of going in and out of consciousness. I do remember telling the nurses to not let me be like one of the characters from Downton Abbey. I had just been watching Downton Abbey, and I was like, don't let me be like Sybil. She died in childbirth. And so that was one of the only things I remember screaming. It was very, I'm glad I can look back on it with some humor now, but that even during those times of trial, I was being irrational and relating things back to television. But my son was born. 25 weeks is, as a lot of people know, it's kind of close to the cusp of viability, depending on which hospital that you're in, which is something that a lot of our families understand. Viability really goes anywhere from 22 to 25 weeks. And I was lucky. I was in Los Angeles at the time at a level 3 NICU. But unfortunately, he had a bilateral grade 4 brain bleed. So the prognosis of that, he also had a skull fracture, some other things had happened. And had he survived, the prognosis of, his quality of life would have been challenging. We don't really know what it would have been like. But unfortunately, we kind of were told that he was not going to survive, and we were given the choice to wait or to take him off life support. And we did the latter. So he lived for about 3 days, and it was very challenging because I was also very sick. But I am profoundly grateful for the time that I had with him. And it kind of set me on this course for what the rest of my life would look like. After I had our son, his name was JP. I found out that I have a really cute thing where I was like born with 2 uteri. It's called I had a kind of a bicornuate septic uterus. And that was part of the reason why I delivered early. So I had several surgeries in between having my kids in order to kind of make my uterus a happy place for babies. I like to call it Extreme Home Makeover Uterus Edition. Ashley really likes it when I say that. And then I got pregnant with my daughter, JJ, and had all different types of medical interventions. Again, for your listeners, they know if you have had premature birth, often you're on a whole other plan with subsequent pregnancies for additional interventions and monitoring to prevent another preterm labor. I got as far as 27 weeks. My water broke. I lasted 2 weeks in the hospital, and my daughter was born at 29 weeks. And she was a totally different story because 4 weeks is a lot of time in utero. And also I was able to receive steroid shots that helped increase her lung development and served as a neuroprotector. So she came out, no brain bleeds, came out literally screaming and has not stopped in the 4 years of her life. And it was wonderful that she was as healthy as she was. She's what they call a feeder grower in the NICU, which is basically she's got to learn how to eat. She got to learn how to poop. She got to learn how to breathe. But I kind of, through the process, there was this inkling in me that something was wrong still. We had this baby, this beautiful, healthy baby with us, and we were so grateful. But unfortunately, my mental health was still declining, and it kind of came to a point when we brought her home. which should have been the happiest days of our life, right? We never had the choice to bring home a baby before. And when we did, I kind of collapsed and I realized that I was suffering from severe PTSD symptoms. For really 5 years of horrific things that had happened to our family. And I slowly began the road to recovery. And part of that was reaching out to somebody on Instagram who I'd been creeping on. And maybe that's a good place to hand it off. Take it away, Ashley Ham.
Oh, well, Martha, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It's not easy probably to go back and talk about a lot of that, but you are making a difference in a lot of other parents who resonate so deeply and so personally with your words. So thank you for sharing that. And yes, Ashley, I'm excited to talk with you. And then I have so many follow-up questions. I can't wait to get into it.
No, I echo what Martha said. Thank you so much for letting us be on your podcast. I know when we had you on ours, we didn't know what to expect. You never know, right? You get that email of let's collaborate, and you're like, hopefully, this is a good collaboration.
Yes.
And I remember after we recorded your episode, we just thought, wow, that went so differently than we expected because we've worked with child life specialists who we really enjoy and who made us feel like children. And so
Yeah.
definitely felt very validated and heard and seen. And you come into your work with a lot of trauma informed practice, and you can tell, and self-compassionate practice. And so thanks for letting us be on yours as well.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks for coming.
But yeah, so I am also a NICU mom. My husband and I, when we first were married, we knew that we wanted to kind of enjoy some of those early married days. So we decided to wait 5 years to have kids. And I didn't have in my family history any, preterm labor or even infertility. So we were pretty, hopeful about getting pregnant. And we actually were able to conceive first try. Right as I got that test, I looked at Ryan and I was like, we were made for this. Like, we only had to try one time. Like, my body was made to have babies. Like, let's go. And so the first week of my pregnancy was totally normal. The second week, I experienced some bleeding, and they told me that I had what is called a
Sub-chorionic hemorrhage.
Thank you. I was going to say
I'm sorry.
placental abruption, but that happened way later.
Yeah.
Yes, a sub-chorionic hemorrhage. And it was just kind of something that they said we're going to watch throughout your pregnancy. Usually after about 12 weeks, it kind of settles. And there's a lot of women who have them and don't even know, but you're showing the bleeding. So we'll just watch it. But when I went to the ER for that bleeding, they wrote on my chart threatened miscarriage. And when I read that, that just kind of sent me into a spiral of anxiety. So every day I was still spotting and bleeding. And all of a sudden, my pregnancy was considered high risk. And I had no friends in my close corner who had experienced that. So from the start, I started to experience a lot of isolation. On top of that, pregnant at the same time as close friends of mine. And so I felt just so disconnected from their pregnancies. It was hard to talk about my pregnancy with other people because we were just on such a different planet. Um, After that 12-week mark, things became, quote, normal. I stopped bleeding. It felt like I finally could kind of enjoy pregnancy. I didn't have any nausea or even fatigue overall. Besides the bleeding, I felt very good in my body. But at our 20-week anatomy scan, they noticed like a little bit of a concern with his heart. And they also suspected potential Down syndrome. So that led us into like another set of tests and specialists, and the main concern being the heart. So at 24 weeks, they wanted us to come in and see a pediatric cardiac ultrasound and have a specialist look through everything. And at this point, the sub-chorionic hemorrhage had, stopped, and then he didn't have Down syndrome. So we felt like there was always these warnings, but then the warnings kind of got better. So we went into this pediatric cardiology appointment thinking that was going to be the case as well. And I remember after the appointment, she came in and she was like, I'd like you to sit down. I think we need to have a change of care.
We'll be right back. Finding the right nutrition for your child that meets their needs can be a challenge for parents and clinicians alike, especially if your child or patient has food allergies or has a condition or illness. You want to feel good about the products you are selecting for your child. To me, finding products that are USDA organic, plant-based, and easily digestible is very important. When one of our very own mamas here at Child Life on Call was choosing nutrition for her sweet son who has complex medical needs, Kate Farms checked off all the boxes of things that were important to her. It is a choice that she felt good about. Kate Farms has outstanding customer service, which during the formula crisis put her at ease. Kate Farms is offering 15% off their products to Child Life On Call parents and professionals who go to their easy-to-navigate, no-fuss website, katefarms.com, and enter code CHILDLIFE. That's one word, CHILDLIFE. Kate Farms, www.katefarms.com, code CHILDLIFE. Code can be used for one purchase only and is valid through May 31st, 2023. Kate Farms is a paid sponsor of today's podcast.
They started talking to us about how he had a specific heart condition that would require surgery upon delivery, and they didn't do that in our local hospital. And so they talked to us about transferring about like 32 weeks to the cities to be closer to those specialists in case we would deliver early. So then again, our pregnancy just became this anxiety of we don't know what's going to happen next. At 28 weeks on the dot, I photographed a wedding. I'm a wedding photographer. And I woke up that morning with some upper abdominal pain, but thought it was heartburn. I called my OB because I just felt really anxious about being out of touch with our local hospital. And they said, sounds like heartburn. I'd sleep on it, but it just never went away. I started to swell. We thankfully made it back to our hometown, and I went into triage, and sure enough, I had severe preeclampsia. At that point, they said, you're not leaving. We need you to stay here for the possibility that you deliver early. And I said, well, I'm not at the right hospital. I need to be in the cities. And so they've all of a sudden, I'm on an ambulance plane. I'm on my way to the cities. It was just a complete and total whirlwind. I get to the cities to find out I'm in the wrong hospital. I wasn't brought to the right to the right
Oh
one.
my God.
So I remember looking at the name badge and going, where am I? And they were like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm not supposed to be here. In hindsight, I'm really glad that I delivered where I did because the care in the NICU team was phenomenal. But at the time, it was just one more thing of like, nothing is going to plan. Like, what do we do next? And so they gave us the option. They said, you can transfer via ambulance, but you're very sick, and the risk of you delivering on the ambulance is very high. And so we, of course, said, okay, anything that's going to put our baby at risk, let's pause. So the nurse comes back in and says, do you need to use the restroom? And I said, actually, I do. So she brought me to the restroom. I went to the bathroom, stood up, and there was blood in the toilet. That didn't quite concern her. She's like, that could be normal. But when I said, I feel like I'm going to faint, she pressed the emergency button because she couldn't find his heartbeat. And so she pressed the emergency C-section button, and within moments, I was shipped off. And I remember looking back at my husband, his hands were on his head. He was just like a white ghost. He just was like, what is happening?
Oh my gosh.
And I was brought into the ER, put under, and woke up to a picture on my husband's phone of my son. He said, Silas is here. And I remember the first question that I asked was, how is Silas? It's amazing how even when you're trying to recover from this like life-saving surgery, you're still thinking about your kids,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's wild. But they found after he was born that he didn't have the initial heart condition that they suspected. He had a different one, so they said he doesn't need surgery. If you'd like to be transferred to your local NICU back home, we can do that, which was really appealing because all of our family was there, our house was there, we could sleep in our own bed. So after 10 days, Silas was put on his own little plane and brought to our local NICU, and that's where we had the remainder of our stay. So he had a total of 87 days in the NICU. And the difference between the two NICUs was the one in the cities was an open pod NICU, and our NICU at our local one was you had your private room. And so, as a patient, that was a big adjustment for many reasons. One being that I was so used to having like 20 nurses in one room. So, if any of his alarms went off, even if our primary wasn't there, someone was like right next door to us.
Yeah.
So, all of a sudden, I was getting used to nurses getting like a alert on their phones and running to our room. But also, that's when I really started to feel the isolation of NICU motherhood. Prior in the other NICU, I could see other parents. It's not like we really talked to each other, but at least I knew like I'm not alone in this room. Like I see other moms. I kind of felt that like community aspect, but when you're in your own room, it was just me and my son and my husband, which was nice for our long stay because we kind of had our own hub, but it also meant increased isolation. And so that again is a big piece of where, this woman who may or may not be on this call reached out to me on Instagram meant so much because at that time I felt incredibly alone.
Wow.
Mm.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Does Silas say all the time to his friends, I was on my first plane when I was 10 days old. Have you been
I
on
would,
a plane before?
It's funny because sometimes I'll say like Silas has been on 2 plane rides and he's not even 4. Or like when he was a newborn, I was like, he's been on 2
mm-hmm,
plane rides. Like, what the
He's
heck?
incredibly worldly.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh my goodness. In all seriousness, though, oh my gosh, what two incredible stories. I so much relate to the sub-chorionic hemorrhage. I had them with both pregnancies, and
Me
there's
too.
just like no getting used to wiping when you're pregnant and
No,
seeing blood.
never.
Like your
Mm-hmm.
brain just
Never.
can't. And then my discharge papers said threatened abortion. And it
That's
was
what
like,
mine said.
yeah. And I was
Yeah.
like,
Weird.
and they're like, that's just what we call this. And I'm like, what? Like, it's
Yeah.
so weird.
Yeah.
Like, do you have to write that? I don't know.
Right now. I know.
Cause
They
I didn't
also,
threaten an abortion. I just want to make
Right.
that clear.
Right.
right. I also think it's so like ER, God bless ER folks, but they are not like, they're not maternal fetal medicine or obstetrics specialists by any means. And they're just like, get them in, get them out. So they just like throw the paperwork at you and they're like, good luck.
I do
Because,
have one really sweet story about
Yeah.
my ER doctor. Um, so when I first went in for the bleeding, again, I was like 6 weeks, so very, very early on. And they did the ultrasound, and of course, you can hardly see anything, right? But what you could see was like this little like mustard seed dot on in my body. And so all of a sudden, I hear outside the door, "I'm going to print this off for her." And I come out, and he's printed me an 8.5 by 11 copy
oh,
of Silas, like as a little dot. And I
oh,
like have that framed because I was like, first of all, that was so sweet of him to print that off on his computer for me. But it was like the very first moment I got to see Silas, and it was so
mm,
I was so grateful for that ER doctor. He was just like a
That
sweet
is
old man.
amazing. Oh, and it was an older man
It
too.
was.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Want
Yeah.
to hug him. I
I
mean,
know.
that's what all medicine should be like really in
Right.
these. It's just like
mm-hmm,
everything should feel like a hug in the
Yes.
delivery. Like, how can I support you and your family? And here's the news, and I love you, and I'm here. Like,
mm-hmm.
why
Exactly.
can't it all just be like that?
I know.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, so I'm interested. Were you posting on Instagram then kind of about your NICU stay, and that's how Martha ended up finding you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I probably waited, was it a month after he was born or maybe 3 weeks? I it was really it felt very vulnerable to post about his birth when we just didn't know a lot, and I was really
Yeah.
nervous about questions. And the NICU is so you take it day by day. One day your child can be doing really well, and the next day they have a setback. And so I probably waited 3 to 4 weeks, but I just posted like our son has been born. And Martha, how soon after did you reach out? Because I feel like it was pretty soon.
Yeah, I think you did one post and I turned to my husband in bed. I was like, look at this girl that I follow. Like I really want to write a message to her because we lived in the same area. I thought she was being really brave and super honest in the way she wrote about it. And I didn't know anybody really who had gone through what I had gone through. So I wanted to kind of make a connection. That's not really somebody who I am because I really like to be home and alone. And so I was like, oh, is it weird to reach out? I don't know. And then you made a second post about how you were struggling with anxiety and depression and how you were going to start taking an antidepressant. And then I was like, okay, I think I'll post. I think I'll write to you. So I did. And I like spent a really long time crafting it. And I was like, Zach, is this weird? And he doesn't know anything about human interaction either. So we were just taking stabs in the dark. And you wrote back like right away. And you were like, oh my gosh, of course. We like periodically they'll come up on my memories and I'll like send the screenshots to you or you'll do vice
Oh,
versa.
I know. I
Um,
should try and find it.
because it's so wild how within a really short period of time we became incredibly dear friends and then started this whole all these shenanigans that became Dear NICU Mama. And I just can't believe that one message and one post on social media is what started that, you know?
I know.
it,
Um,
It's so brave of you and like life changing clearly. And it's
Mhm.
like that little leap of faith that you did that night is just kind of changed the trajectory of, your journey into parenthood. It's pretty amazing. While we're
Mhm.
on the topic of social media, it's such like a beautiful and horrible place, and we all know that, and
Yeah.
we speak very
Yeah.
much to like this living in two worlds, which NICU parents and parents of kids that have illness and diseases know more than anybody. Like you can be in one moment and then the next you're like, how am I living in both worlds? And social media can feel like that. Some of the great things are these connections, and some of the hard things are like watching other people's kids do well, right? And like
Mhm.
what that brings up for you, or watching other worst case scenarios and having guilt. And I'm wondering like what does it bring up for you guys, and what do you how do you navigate that stress?
That's a really good question.
Mhm.
I think it's really unique when your job also exists on social media. So, for some people, social media is purely entertainment, and for others, it's also your job.
Yeah.
And so I think that can create a different element. But for me, Martha and I talk about it often. We'll send each other posts and we're like, this is so inappropriate. Like, why would, why would
Yeah.
someone post this? But we can't always control what other people post, but we can control what we see. And so for me, that's looked like muting certain accounts or simply unfollowing certain accounts. Um, you know, if on like a personal level, if there's someone that I love that is pregnant and posting a lot about pregnancy, sometimes I'll simply just like mute for a season. And then it's not because I'm not extremely joyous and happy for them, but more so just out of guarding my heart and protecting my heart. That's
I
just like
love
one
that.
simple thing that I can do.
And that's allowed. Like
Yeah.
that's allowed. You don't have to cheer on every
Right.
single person for every single, and I'm not just saying this to you, I'm saying it to myself too and everybody. It's like we're consuming so much. Like there's parts that we can mute. I love that. That's such good advice.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it too is knowing and making sure that the content that we're putting out into the world, whether it be the Dear NICU Mama social media advocacy, we have like a very large Facebook group community, and the podcast and all of our events and everything else is uses the exact same tone, and that it is trauma informed and it is very clear in its scope. We are not medical providers. We are not mental health experts. We are peer support. We're storytellers, right? We share stories and build connection. So that means, I think it looks like Ashley is really careful working with the editorial team and on crafting the messaging that goes out. Is it trauma filled and validating? How is it also hope filled? Is it inspiring? How are we making sure that we're encompassing 360-degree view of all the different types of audiences that we reach? Wanting to make sure that we're being as careful as possible. And so I cannot commend Ashley enough, because every single piece of verbiage that comes through the website, that is a service to the world, right? Is basically Ashley 100%. She did it all.
Mm.
So it's like, to me, it's this greatest gift she's given to people, which is like 18 books basically on the NICU experience and trauma support that are out there for the world.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
I think that plays a role in it too. Um, and we've seen it in action. The Facebook group. Facebook groups can be gnarly. They can be nasty. I think everybody has been a part of, all of your listeners have been a part of like a Facebook group for rare diseases or CHD or loss or whatever. And they can become very hostile and ugly. But we have set a very strong tone in the group that is, we're not just going to, it's not going to be a mom group where we're sharing like, look at this kid's rash. What do you think this is? And it's not going to be a trauma dump. It's going to be a place where you can come being vulnerable and be met, not with barrages of criticism or people trying to solve your problems, but people who are sitting and listening. It's really delicate, and we have some incredible volunteers who moderate it. But I think that's part of our role too, is it's like making and holding that space in social media.
Well, and I think that's one of the main reasons Dear NICU Mama was created is when I was in the NICU,
Yeah.
Not only did I not have anybody close to me who had experienced it, but I remember someone had shared something on Facebook, and the article said 99 or something percent of NICU moms will struggle with PTSD for the rest of their life. And I looked at that and I was like, I'm doomed. Like, if this is my future, it does it not get better? Like, I just
Yeah.
like, I read that. And at that point too, I was very not well versed in like this new world of maternal mental health and things. And so I didn't know that all I could think of with PTSD was veterans. And I was like, I'm going to be
Mhm.
scared of fireworks. I'm going to be jumpy. Like, I literally just had
Yeah.
no grid of what PTSD was. And from there, it just spiraled. There was tons of articles about how I was going to have anxiety, depression. I'd never be the same. My kid was going to struggle. And I was like, these statistics are not helping me. Like,
Mhm.
these are scaring me. And so when we started Dear NICU Mama, we both came to this like very permanent decision of like everything that we post has to have a message of hope, because if not, what are we doing? Like,
Yeah.
NICU moms every single day are met with statistics. That's literally what the NICU is. It's
Right.
probabilities. It's like, well, they could be better, they could be not. Like, we
Yeah.
don't need to give NICU moms more statistics. We need to give them hope. We
Yeah.
need to remind them that, yeah, this sucks. Like,
Yeah.
there's no other word for it. This is painful, but you are not alone. You can
Mm.
do this. It won't always feel this way. This was not your fault.
Yeah.
That changes everything because
Mm.
all of a sudden a statistic is no longer the defining number of their future. It's, you know what, I may have PTSD, but I'm also a good mother for my baby, and I will not always feel this way. There is hope at the end of this. And so that, sorry, I just got very on my soapbox about that, but
Oh my gosh, please
um
continue.
but
Please keep going. I love it.
to this day, that is that everything that we post is, it has to have a message of hope. We are not afraid to talk about PTSD because it's a real thing for all of
Right.
us. But even in your PTSD, you are still the best mother for your baby. Even in your PTSD, you don't journey through it alone.
Right.
Even in your PTSD, there is hope, and that changes everything.
Yeah. I think you so eloquently just put it that you have y- it's not like hope-filled rose-colored glasses that everything's
Mhm.
going to be okay. This toxic positivity. That's really hard to
Yes.
say.
You're right. Yeah.
Toxic positivity, but it's this real hope, and you can feel it. And like Martha, like you were saying, how Ashley puts this just beautiful content out there that is reaching so many families and so many parents is just amazing. I have a couple more questions for you. Oh, one comment is we have to do research on the isolation felt by NICU moms in private rooms versus
Yeah.
open-based settings. So let's just make a note of that. Any researchers listening?
Well, and this was also noted prior to COVID. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another
multiply
element.
that times a million. I mean, it just,
Yeah. We'll be right back. If you have ever wondered where you could get those cloth dolls that child life specialists use with kids for medical education or sending home to siblings or to draw on for therapeutic activities, then you don't have to wonder any longer, because our friends at Smile Makers have decided to now sell these amazing cloth dolls for a very affordable price. I know that when I was in the hospital, I would have to rely on a volunteer network to then give us the dolls, which was really nice, but I had to wait a lot of times. Like, I would need a doll now and I wasn't able to get it. So this is a great place to be able to go get your procedure dolls at smilemakers.com. And y'all, they have 3 different skin tones for these cloth procedure dolls. In addition, you can actually buy a procedure doll prep bundle that comes with fabric markers. This is a fabulous way to do your medical teaching, to help siblings feel involved, to get kids creative, to do a lot of teaching about different diagnoses. And so go to smilemakers.com so you can get your cloth dolls as soon as possible before they run out. And when you go to that checkout to get your cloth dolls, also type in OnCall20 and you will get 20% off your entire order. So not just the cloth dolls. So if you get a bundle for Child Life Specialists, if you get a piece of furniture, if you get one of their really cool toys and prizes, or you order a large sticker order from them, OnCall20 gets you 20% off your whole order. That's smilemakers.com, code OnCall20 to get 20% off. Okay. And then I have so much I want to ask you. We only
yeah.
have so much limited time left. Um, What are your members talking about in the Facebook group? Like, what are some stories or things that you've seen that have really been like, oh, wow, we need to make sure every NICU mom has this?
I think one thing we see a lot of is, and this is perfect for Dear NICU Mama, right? Because we're not medical support, we're not mental health professionals, but a lot of it is, how do I communicate with my loved ones, my spouse, my parents, my friends, now that I have been changed in a completely formative way? I am not the same that I was before because this happened. And because this experience happened, a lot of times we'll hear moms saying, I hear a lot of my close support system saying, you need to just get over it. Your baby's healthy. You should be over it by now. You're dwelling. That's the amount of times people will comment and say, my spouse won't talk with me about what happened to us. Or I don't feel safe taking our baby to family Christmas, and my in-laws aren't understanding, right? It's navigating a lot of social situations post NICU actually is a lot of things that pop up. And the response to that is, your baby, your family, your physical and mental well-being come first. And here are some things that I've done with my family and my support system that have worked for me.
Mm.
But it's really about healthy boundary setting and empowering parents to know that they are the best babies for their children. And because of that, they can make the best decisions for their children with the information they have at the time.
I love that. That's so important to talk about. And the fact that it's probably just so validating, even for people listening right now, that those are thoughts that you're having, real things that you have to navigate post any kind of life-changing, transformative medical situation.
Mhm. I think that's exactly what I was going to say a lot of the conversations are around, family and how to communicate your needs and how to explain. I think we've come a long way with maternal mental health and how it's talked about and how we understand it. I think generationally, there's still a gap between maybe
Yeah.
what our parents would define as mental health and what our generation will define as mental health. And so sometimes it's exhausting because it feels like we're educators on
Yeah.
like what maternal mental health is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But a lot of it is sticking up for yourself and saying, no, like I'm getting help not because I'm not grateful, but because I'm so grateful that I want to be the best mom that I can be.
Mhm.
And I think and really shedding a light on what grief is. As a culture, we're so uncomfortable with grief. As an individual, I'm still uncomfortable with grief. I don't like it. I don't want to feel it in my body. But reminding moms that grief and joy can coexist, that even in your grief, there's still joy. Even in your joy, you can still feel grief. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And even as a mother myself, the times when I've just been validated that my grief is valid, that what is grief and how do we feel it, and oh, I'm not going crazy, I'm grieving. That makes
Mhm.
sense,
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of thing. And so I think, yeah, the family, and then just continuing to advocate not only for your baby but for your mental health as well.
Mhm.
I love that. It's what you said. I was recently a part of a workshop, and she calls herself, I will link her in the show notes. I can't think of her name right now, but instead of self-care, she calls it soul care. And
Mhm.
she said, what if every time these thoughts creep up, you just say to yourself, it's so understandable you would feel that way. Just that
Mhm.
phrase. And I have been practicing that nonstop. And it is
Mm,
so incredibly helpful, because I'm like, it is understandable that I would feel
yeah,
this way or react like this.
yeah,
I love that. So I have
so
two more questions, one for you
mm,
each. I'm going to start with you, Martha, since you let us off today. But I would love to hear just a little bit about what JJ and JP have taught you about yourself as a person since they've come into your life.
here come the tears from me.
Yes. And because I know that you would cry, then I immediately stopped up and I was like, I can never cry. Thank you, nervous system, for being so dysregulated. I, so JP, that loss, losing a child, it's like taking off a pair of sunglasses and then you're standing in broad daylight. It changes everything about the way that you see the world forever. And there was a lot of softness that surrounded us, surprisingly, in that experience. So the way that we were taken care of by other people, I think, is quite holy, actually. And it taught me how to lean into grief and pain and understand, like Ashley said, that there's a lot of beauty in it. A child is something that has been exemplified, and I understand now more than anything else. And I feel like have become more empathetic and understanding of other people's pain because of it, which I think is a superpower, you know. And JJ is still teaching me things. Like I literally just talked to my therapist about it this morning. She is me. It's really weird to look at a carbon copy of yourself. And so, you know how you were describing self-compassion earlier. And one thing I'm trying to figure out is I see this child who is actually, she's been in, we had the same trauma, right? What happened to me medically also happened to her medically. And so learning to parent her in a compassionate way, and also learning how to take care of myself in a compassionate way so that she has a model for how to become a person that is regulated and strong and resolute is now my number one goal. And I don't know, I probably meet it like 50% of the time, but I'm working on it. I hope that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And we talked about this before the audio started recording, but I'm on a new antidepressant and I didn't think I could cry, but I did get a couple tears.
Good.
It's when you described your ability to see compassion and empathy in other people as a superpower. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, because I agree. You have that superpower. It's amazing to watch.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you to say.
And Ashley, I bet you can guess what your question is, but I would love to hear what Silas has taught you about yourself since he came into your life.
Oh man. Silas, it's hard to like narrow it down. I'm like, oh
It
my gosh.
is.
He's taught you a lot about dinosaurs.
He's taught me a lot about dinosaurs.
Blippi.
A lot about Paw Patrol. I think Silas has just every day that I get with him is just a reminder that miracles exist. And it has forever changed, again, the way that I can relate to other people. I think until you've gone through something traumatic yourself or gone through the fire, do you really know how to sit in the fire with other people? And he, because of our story, because of his life, like I now know how to sit in the fire with other people. He, I look at the mountains that he had to climb at such a young age, literally at birth, and to this day, like I'm just in awe of the boy that he is, and that I get to just like sit back and watch this miracle unfold before me. But I go into the world now with just like a different softness. I look at the world just so differently now. I look at prayer differently now. I look at how I love people so differently now because of our experience. And he changed everything. I mean, the moment that I conceived him and then the moment that he was born, it changed everything. And so he's forever changed how I see the world. And to this day, the wonder that he sees in the world, I now get to see. And I'm so, so grateful for that.
I love that. Well, you two are so complimentary of each other. Like I'm just envisioning you both as a hug. And like Ashley, you're like the really soft, like warm hug that I need. And Martha, you're like that tight embrace. It's like, heck yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Like it's like the best hug just talking with you both. And what you're bringing to the world is such a gift. And so please tell people how they can become a part of Dear NICU Mama. Is it just for existing NICU moms, or who can join?
Dear NICU Mama exists for both the NICU mom at bedside today and the NICU mom who was at bedside 50 years ago. I think the remarkable thing about this sisterhood is there's a fierce loyalty to each other. Many of us have journeyed through the NICU alone, and we don't want any other NICU mom to have to endure that themselves. And so it's really amazing when we can connect with a mom whose NICU journey was 50, 30 years ago and say, I wish I had this. How can I be a part of making sure that, other women my age have access to this? Or how can I love other NICU moms that are maybe in our age or more like in our season of life? And so it's for anybody, the past and present NICU mom or birth giver. We want to be there for you.
Love that. And how can they find you and join your Facebook community you mentioned? And what other resources do you have?
Well, I could take that one.
Yes.
They can find access to all of it at www.dearnicumama.com. Our handle on Facebook and Instagram is at Dear NICU Mama. Really easy to find there. You can find a link to the Facebook group, the private Facebook group on the website as well. There's a lot of other ways to get involved. We have letters that we release every week that are written from NICU moms to other NICU moms, and we publish them. They're gorgeous. So you can submit a letter to be involved with that. We have a volunteer application. If you're a provider, you can reach out to us and we'll happily send you materials that you can share with your clients and patients to connect them with Dear NICU Mama resources. We also have a link to the podcast online too. We've got 100 episodes and counting there. Feel free to start at the very beginning and hear our audio quality change and improve. There's some upcoming events that you can find too. It's all linked on the website. So feel free to get on there and explore, and reach out to us if you have questions about how to find something or are looking for a way to connect. We will help you get to the right place.
And I think Martha and Ashley are the perfect testament to like get brave and reach out to that person that you've been following on Instagram that seems to be walking a similar path, or go find them in the Dear NICU Mama support group because they're out there. And it's just amazing what you two have created. So thank you so much for your time today and being here. I want to have you back at some point because I could just keep talking to you forever.
Same.
Oh my gosh, the exact same. You are a joy. You're so wonderful.
So are you guys.
You
yeah.
You really are.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Child Life On Call podcast. The only reason this podcast keeps on going is because of you and listeners like you. So please join in on the conversation with us on Instagram, Facebook. I'm even on TikTok now, y'all, making a fool of myself. I haven't danced yet, but maybe it's coming. You can find us at Child Life On Call. We also have a website, and that has all of our information about the Child Life Circle, about the Child Life On Call app, and a blog with new information all the time. That's childlifeoncall.com. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart for listening to these episodes and being a part of this community. We are so grateful and so honored to be able to provide this for you.